Hello team, it's me, Jonathan MS Pearce, coming to you from the south coast of the UK to talk to you about geopolitical comings and goings in the world of the Ukraine war. So, lots to talk to you about. Hopefully you are all well in the live chat. Welcome. Yes, I did a video earlier on today concerning obviously my hits and losses video, and then it's inspired me to do a video on the Vranyo and the disinformation that gets up the chain of command in Russia, such that Putin and maybe Gerasimov as well, and who knows who else in the top of the chain of command, don't have a clue as to what's going on really on the front lines in Ukraine. And that can be said as well for Donald Trump, because primarily he gets his information, or has been getting his information, from Putin. Anyway, please go and check that video out, because I think it's a really important video. I do go to town on that a little bit. Really please watch out if you haven't already done so. Okay, so we are going to be starting our geopolitical journey in just a second, as I move my face over to the other screen. We're going to start, where are we going to start? Talking about the funding concerning the frozen assets. So let's get on it. Right. We're going to start here with Max25 giving us a synopsis of the Politico article. The EU is developing a plan B for financing Ukraine after Belgium refuses to seize Russian assets. So there's a lot of ink being spilt, I guess, at the moment concerning Belgium. They seem to be very much putting the stop to frozen Russian assets being used in whole to support Ukraine. Currently, there are three options, but I'm frustrated with what Belgians do. If you are a Belgian viewer out there, so Sophie, I know watches this, and other Belgian citizens, if you can just pop round to Brussels, knock on the door of your powers that be and say, look, stop this, please release the frozen Russian assets for Ukraine, so that because the issue with not releasing these funds is not just about Ukraine and about getting Ukraine a huge amount of funding, but it's actually about all of these other countries in Europe not having to provide funding from their own pockets, from their own taxpayer coffers for Ukraine. Like, this is so important, because there's going to be resentment coming from taxpayers who aren't receiving money for hospitals and education. Why is it all going to support Ukraine? Obviously, you know, there's a whole existential fight going on for the future of democracy and Europe, but actually that's quite a tough sell for some people in the electorate. And it's really important that if money can come from the Russians themselves for Ukraine, then it does so. There are just multiple benefits there. And yeah, it is a real issue that Belgium, I think, are putting a kibosh on this. But anyway, Max25 says there are three options, as according to Politico: issuance of joint debt worth tens of billions of euros by the bloc's member states, a reparations loan secured by Russian assets, and refusal to finance Kiev. This option is supported only by Hungary, of course. In the absence of new funds, Ukraine will face an acute shortage of finances by the end of the first quarter. This really is a big problem. Now, to look into a little bit more detail, and I understand this, and I talked about this the other day, that Belgium, one of the things they want is all the other countries to share the risk, and I would have thought that would be easy and obvious, and the rest of Europe, or the EU as a whole, would do that, because actually all of this money is being kept, or most of it is being kept, in Euroclear, which is a Belgian entity. And if Belgium then say give the okay, the green light to the EU sorting out some kind of funding for Ukraine by using the Euroclear funding, then if it all goes south, if something goes wrong, if there's a big court case that goes against that, then Belgium are the ones that are going to be picking up the tab for essentially all of the funding going from Euroclear through the EU to Ukraine. So I do understand why they want to share that risk, and I presume that would be somewhat easy to sort out, I would hope. So if it is just about this, so Grunching Ronnie here saying, to speak as a devil's advocate, Bart de Wever just asks for assurances for backlash by mortals. So if Russia do create some kind of legal backlash, then that there are assurances. So it's frustrating. If you know, it's easy for me to say it's Belgium's fault, but actually, if that's all they want, then that should be given. I think that's completely understandable from Belgium. But anyway, Europe has frozen 193 billion euros of Russian assets. Belgium has blocked the plan to use them and collected 1.7 billion euros in taxes instead. So there is a benefit to Belgium as well, which is somewhat complicating matters, because they actually get a tax benefit from frozen Russian assets being frozen in Belgium and that in Europe, and that's arguably why they also don't want to have this plan come through, because then I presume they might lose that income. At the same time, the interest on the assets is also melting. So last year, the assets earned 6.9 billion euros in interest. And I don't know why this is, to be perfectly honest. But this year, only 3.9 billion euros was accrued in interest. And that's pretty important there. Okay, so we are going to move on now. I'm going to get rid of these tabs as I go, because I've got 8 gazillion tabs open. Not that you can see them, actually. Right, so we are going to go on to Germany, and their interior minister is saying that the AfD is acting like Putin's German party. We're going to talk quite a bit about populism, because we're going to talk about what's going on in... I do have a reform video that's separate to it. I'm not going to talk about them particularly today. There is a section of this video on Argentina and their election that's just taken place, and their populist leaders just effectively, well, the legislative elections have taken place, and his party has just got voted back in fairly comfortably, which has surprised some. And he's a populist leader. We're going to look at how, in general, populist regimes or populist governments do not do a good job of running economies. So I think on average they lose 10% of the economic kind of prosperity. So, you know, be wary about populist governments, not just from their kind of rhetoric on this and on that, and on, you know, whether you are for or against immigration or this or that. Actually be very wary of them, because they're not very good at running governments. So anyway, Germany's Interior Minister Alexander Dobrindt has said that the far-right Alternative for Germany, AfD party, openly demonstrates its closeness to Putin and has raised, quote, legitimate suspicions of spying for Russia. He made the remarks in an interview with Handelsblatt. Right, I've got a bit of a correction here. Belgium doesn't collect the taxes. We give those to Ukraine, and Belgium is the only country doing that. That would be fantastic if that's the case. I need to look into that. Anyway, to continue this, Dobrindt noted that the party's behavior goes beyond mere political sympathy. Quote, such a stance fuels suspicions that this is about something more than just affinity. Earlier, Thuringia. So Thuringia is an area in eastern Germany that is very pro-AfD. Their interior minister, Georg Mayer, said AfD was abusing its parliamentary inquiry rights to collect information on Germany's transport, digital and energy infrastructure. Suspicions deepened after AfD deputy leader Markus Frohnmayer announced plans to visit Moscow for political talks. CSU Secretary General Martin Huber called the trip an act of treason and demanded it be banned. Quote, how deep these ties go must be determined by investigators, Dobrindt emphasized. Now, isn't it funny, not funny ha-ha, but funny frustrating, or funny interesting to point out, that we have a situation whereby the AfD had these very close connections to Russia, that I think Confederation possibly in... I'm speculating a little bit, in Poland do, but in the UK we've got the equivalent to AfD, and in France you've got Rassemblement National that have had that funding connection to Russia. Reform UK are... the Welsh leader of Reform UK has just been found guilty of 8 counts of bribery on behalf of Russia, And we have Nigel Farage having some connections to Russia that I think needs to be investigated. He was on RT 17 to 20 times. He was going to be offered an RT Russia Today show. And there's more coming out as the weeks go by. I sign up to Byline Times, and they've got a fantastic article on the connections and how close Nigel Farage was to Nathan Gill, the guy that was done for bribery, and how that it really should be investigated. And here we have exactly the same thing going on. It's like peas from a pod. These right-wing populist parties are just very close to Russia, and they are in that sphere of influence, and they need to be investigated. How deep these ties go must be determined by investigators. That's going on in Germany. That's the same claim, I would say, should be the same claim in the UK too. Okay, moving on then, we are going to go to Estonia. Their Foreign Minister, Margus Tsahkna, has said that Ukraine must join NATO with foreign troops on the ground. So this is a huge claim, really, from Estonia, although relatively small country, not much notice will be taken, unfortunately, of this Europe-wide. But, quote, we were the first to say security means boots on the ground. NATO membership must follow a ceasefire. I mean, I absolutely agree with this. Ukraine being a member of NATO is not only improving NATO vastly with their experience and technological know-how and whatnot, but also it's the cheapest way of providing security guarantees for any country wanting to assist in security guarantees for Ukraine. It just is the cheapest way. All you have to do is say you're part of NATO now, bish bash bosh, and that's it. There's no like we need to pay X billion pounds to put British forces on the ground in Ukraine. No, you just say you're a member of NATO now, and Article 5 now covers you, and that should be the deterrence for Russia. Anyway, moving on, continuing to talk about NATO, former NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg has said that Russia feels more encircled than they really are. So they feel more encircled than they really are. It's not NATO expanding aggressively east. It's free democratic nations in Central and Eastern Europe that wants to join. This is the Russian narrative has long been that that NATO has been aggressively expanding eastwards, when the reality is that NATO isn't expanding. It's not seeking to take on members. It's just that, former Warsaw Pact countries willingly wanted to come into NATO as soon as they were out of the grasp of the Soviet Union. It isn't NATO wanting to expand. It's the countries around Russia wanting to be a part of NATO. And that tells you all you need to know about Russia or the Soviet Union. And Ukraine not being allowed to join NATO is arguably one of the reasons why they've been invaded. Anyway, on this front, one of the big proponents of the NATO expansionism narrative is Jeffrey Sachs, who is one of these. He's actually an economist, but he's a kind of a big thinker in the political realist realm. So that people like him and John Mearsheimer and others who really advocate for effectively for Russia by saying, well, it's not politically realistic for Ukraine to stand up, and they were invaded precisely because of NATO expansionism and EU expansionism and all that kind of crap. Well, he was on TV in Italy the other day, and it didn't go well for him. And lots of people saying that this is how people like Jeffrey Sachs should be treated. Jimmy Russian saying this is exactly how you should deal with Jeffrey Sachs, who is both a pathological liar and a Russian propagandist. Treat him with overt contempt. What happened? Well, Italian Senator Carlo Calenda left Jeffrey Sachs literally speechless and shocked him by calling him a liar and a propagandist. It happened on Italian primetime television. It's priceless. Now, the problem is it's dubbed over. All the recordings I can find are it's in English, but they dub it over in Italian, and then it has to be subtitled in English. So I would love to get the original English response from Jeffrey Sachs, but you can see here that it didn't end well for him, and lots of people talking about it. So brilliant. I'm here for this kind of stuff. So let's just look at I'm going to actually put the volume on, but quite low, so you can sort of hear it if you want.
It's incredible. È incredibile.
You don't know how much the United States.
Non sa quanto gli Stati Uniti.
Actually, no, I won't. But you do need to. It does help to sort of hear the audio. Anyway, incredible. He says, "I'll make it bigger, but you won't be able to hear all of." In fact, if I do it this way, you can. So, the United States pays for the overthrow of Yanukovych. So this is the idea that the Euromaidan was a coup, a US coup, typical Russian propaganda. This is your American economist saying this. I was there, he says. I saw it. I was taken around to Maidan by the people who paid. I was there as well, says Calendar. I was minister. And I love this. I love people being called out by like, yeah, I was there. The kind of claim of like, oh, I know more than you because I was there type thing. It's like, yeah, I was there too. And that's not my experience at all. Anyway, so Calendar says, I was there as well. I was minister, senator. Now it's my turn, says Sachs back to him. Please, Professor Sachs. You weren't there when I was taken around, and they explained to me, we gave 15,000 to this one, 20,000 to that one. Are you saying it didn't happen? Yes, I think it didn't happen, replies the senator from Italy. Yes, I think it didn't happen. Yes, I think you are lying, which is huge, just like with the vaccine. And can I say something? One moment, one at a time, please. It's obnoxious, really obnoxious. It may sound obnoxious, but I think, so there's a bit of an argument here, and I'm kind of, without telling you who's saying what. So Sachs says it's obnoxious, it's really obnoxious. And the Italian says, yes, it is obnoxious, but I think you are you calling me a liar? Says Sachs. Yeah, absolutely, yes. I think you're making Putinist propaganda. How dare you, says Sachs. I'm stunned. Frankly, that's my opinion. Did you call me a liar? Yes. And there you go. Just absolutely brilliant. So more of that, please. Much more of that. Let's go back to actually. No, let's continue with this because I think it is important. So then you have the compare the host coming in. Books and investigations have been written about the events of Maidan, and there are very different positions. Not really, says Calendar. One position or another does not necessarily mean that one is lying. This is the host saying this, that one is lying and one is telling the truth. And then the senator says, but you made 20 broadcasts on Maidan telling how Ukrainians wanted to be European. I remember those broadcasts. So you were fooled as well? It was an American conspiracy? Well, the host then says, no, I told what happened, Senator. When you covered the Euromaidan, says the senator, I remember those broadcasts. You were there, right? Didn't you tell about the Ukrainian youngsters who wanted to become Europeans? They were all paid by the CIA. And another question, why the Ukrainian army in Crimea had no bullets so that Putin's little green men took it in 2 minutes? There were Americans in Crimea? Professor Sachs, without Professor? The debate in Italy is very heated, sometimes too much so. Have your say, don't worry, we've made it, blah, 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 whatever. Okay, it's heated, but it's absolutely shocking, says Sachs. So, like, he's obviously, you know, it's difficult for me to communicate this with me just reading the subtitles, but he's a bit taken aback. And I think you've heard me say time and time again that reporters, in this case, it's the co-interviewee, right, the Italian senator, but reporters need to hold people to account much more, and hosts of TV shows. And in order to do that, you need to have the requisite knowledge of the subject that you're talking about, of course, and that's not always the case. You know, reporters might be reporting on all sorts of things rather than very narrowly on one thing. Like, so if I was talking to Jeffrey Sachs, I would challenge, because I've got a knowledge of a very narrow field of events and whatnot, whereas a general reporter might not have that. But there needs to be people being held, their feet held to the fire over these sorts of claims, especially when they are so dangerous. I think the claims of people like Jeffrey Sachs are incredibly dangerous. And I love the fact that he was just to his face called out for being a liar, because I think that is the case. I think people like Jeffrey Sachs are saying more and more overtly, and John Mearsheimer's, like, horrific things. I think, was it Sachs or Mearsheimer that was interviewed by Tucker Carlson? I think it was Sachs, actually. Just like just horrifically disingenuous disinformation being spread, and they need to be called out on it. You are a liar, and you appear to be saying things that align rather conspicuously with the Kremlin agenda. So what's going on there? I'm just asking questions, Jeffrey. But are you taking money from the Kremlin? Like, it's a yes or no question. Like, is there any money that goes from Russia to, in some tenuous way, to your pockets? I want on the record for you to say that you do not receive any funding in any way, shape, or form from Russia, because we know how good they are at this kind of stuff. Please tell me that that's not the case, because, you know, we can go to here. America, never forget what those scumbag traitors did to America. They turned on America to spread Russian propaganda, to sway your elections, and to manipulate your population. Disgusting, says this particular source. But it's a tenant media thing. You know, this is just one way that money goes into American pockets, through a Canadian Lauren Chen, and Liam Donovan starting up Tenant Media, which is taking Russian money directly. You've got Russian producers and all these sorts of people, and obviously Putin at the top there, FSB. Money goes to Tenant Media, and that gets spread to Tim Pool, Benny Johnson. What are these guys doing? Oh, they're now reporting from the White House, being given press passes by the Caroline Leavitt and the White House press and the press secretary. You know, Dave Rubin, Lauren Southern, Matt Christensen, and Taylor Hanson. These are all firmly in the MAGA information spheres and they are taking money. They were taking money from Russia, and we know that, right? This happened, and they even kind of admitted it, but said they didn't realize it was coming from Russia, blah, blah, blah. But then after that, they are given press passes, at least two of these press passes. Tim Pool gets to sit in the freaking White House and ask questions to Caroline Leavitt from that seat on the right-hand side as you look out of the press pool. It's like, hang on. Just a couple of months ago, he's taking stupendous amounts of money from the Kremlin for spreading Russian disinformation. And now he's at the heart of the White House reporting on political events. It's absolutely insane. Like, more needs to have been made of that. Like, those people, Tim Pool and Benny Johnson, should not be allowed to have anything to do with the American administration. They should simply not. And I don't understand how that is not the case. Yeah, and I was wondering about this, Vigo. Aren't they accredited with the Pentagon? I think they probably are. I think Tim Pool is accredited with the Pentagon, and quite possibly Benny Johnson. I mean, the list of people are accredited now to the Pentagon. So if you remember, in fact, time to get this. I've got all sorts of things coming later, but I keep bringing them forward. So with regard to the Pentagon, where is it? I'm sure I've got something on that. You have, no, I can't find it. You have the situation whereby Pete Hegseth dictated that because he's trying to, oh, here it is. Oh, this is perfect. Oh, you're going to love this. So InfoWars is now has a Pentagon press pass. So this is just absolutely outrageous, where you've got your man from InfoWars. Oh, my MS brain has just had a brain fart. Alex Jones there, who, you know, for a joke shaved his moustache in just like Hitler's, although he was saying that, yeah, this is just what fascist Democrats want to look like, and blah blah blah. Anyway, he and his outright disinformation network InfoWars, that he was taken to court by the Sandy Hook families who, yeah, Sandy Hook was an elementary school where there was a big shooting there and loads of children were shot. And then he said it was a false flag operation that didn't happen, blah, blah, blah. And all these parents are like, I've literally lost my child in a school shooting. What do you mean it didn't happen? So they took him to court and he lost it. And he is on track to lose InfoWars. It was going to be bought out by The Onion. I don't know what's going on with it now, but I presume he's appealing everything and whatnot. But he's either has already been bankrupted or is very soon going to be bankrupted. He's given a press pass to the Pentagon where Hegseth said, right, you have to sign an agreement that we get oversight over what you say. You're not allowed to speak to any of these people unless we give you the sign off on this, and you can't print stuff that we don't want you to print. And they all walked out. including Fox News and including Newsmax, and it was only OAN was the only who are a real right-wing media source that are remaining in the Pentagon, having signed that agreement. And then you get people like Tim Pool and now freaking InfoWars. It's absolutely insane, and it's like, what is going on in the United States that we are in this situation? I mean, it is so reminiscent of a dictatorship. It really, really is in so many ways. Okay, anyway, we're going to move on now to Italy, well, back to Italy, actually, where their court has now approved an extradition, which I think it originally didn't. And then the Polish courts are not going to extradite another chap who's incarcerated at the moment, or in custody in Poland, who is a Ukrainian who is supposedly responsible for the blowing up of Nord Stream 2. Well, it looks like the Italian court has now approved the extradition of a Ukrainian suspect in a Nord Stream case. He identifies as Serhiy K. Was arrested in August near the Italian town of Rimini. I remember because I was speaking to you about playing at the Paganello Beach Ultimate Tournament for the World Beach Ultimate Championships 2 years back in my more sporting younger days. And that's in Rimini. Beautiful beach there, lovely. Anyway, under a European arrest warrant, Reuters reported the lawyer said the defense would appeal the ruling. So maybe something might happen in the appeal there. Okay, moving on to now Fredrickson, Mette Fredrickson. Just seeing whether there's anything in the chat that is relevant to what I've been saying. Thank you very much for your lively chat, guys. Good to have you there. Now, Putin's strategy was to wait us out, she says, the Danish premier, hoping we'd stop supporting Ukraine and eventually give in. That will never happen, said Mette Fredrickson during the London summit. So this is really good. We need to keep hearing this, of course. And there is a vulnerability here, because we heard Joe Biden say the same thing, you know, and until the end or whatever, for as long as is necessary. And then he gets voted out and Trump's like, yeah, that's a load of bollocks. We're just, we're going to change our position on Ukraine. So it wasn't, you know, for as long as it takes and all that kind of stuff. So one must be careful. But I guess for as long as Mette Fredrickson is in charge of Denmark, and I assume they're not going to have some kind of, because of the way that coalitions work and the way that proportional representation works in countries like this, it's unlikely you're going to get the diametric opposite to a government taking over and changing things like hugely. That's one of the benefits of coalitions. Also, some might say one of the weaknesses, because you can't get radical change and blah blah blah. But anyway, there you go. That's what she said in London. So let's just remind ourselves of, actually, before we go back to London, in terms of the coalition, the winning meeting, the Telegraph wrote an article that Britain must look at sharing nuclear weapons with Germany to counter the critical threat posed by Russia. According to defense chiefs, former chief of defense staff and NATO secretary general have urged the UK to open up talks with Berlin over a fresh defense pact. So we've already done a defense pact with Germany since, I think, Starmer has come in, and possibly since Merz as well. Share our nuclear weapons with Germany, says British military chiefs. The tagline is Russia's nuclear saber rattling prompts senior leaders to urge the UK to open up talks with Berlin over fresh defense pact. Of course, that gets us closer to Europe, which some people might like. I very much am a fan of that. Others might be a little bit, ooh. It's also something that's been discussed with regard to France giving a nuclear umbrella for Europe. And it's a lot to do with the US. So Europe used to be essentially defended in terms of nuclear more by the US through NATO than through European allies. We kind of helped with the NATO thing, I guess, but it was more about the US, and, you know, Germany has American military presence there, of course, but seeing that the US has become an unreliable ally of late, Germany is looking to the UK as being more reliable and geographically closer, and saying, look, and this is actually coming from the UK UK thinkers as much as from Germany, that we need to support Germany with a nuclear umbrella coming from ourselves. Germany was already in strategic discussions with Paris over how the French could provide potential protection in the form of its own nuclear deterrent. However, Friedrich Merz, the German Chancellor, has hinted he would be keen to discuss a similar arrangement with Sir Keir Starmer, and that seems eminently sensible to me. Okay, then we had as you know, this happened some days ago now, but still some conversation to be had around what took place at the Coalition of the Willing in London, where Zelensky turned up and other world leaders turned up as well. New 5-point plan for Ukraine developed by the Coalition of the Willing by the end of the year. I had someone criticize, someone that wants to criticize Keir Starmer, because, you know, if you go onto Twitter these days, in fact, there was a new, I was looking at some analysis. Someone was speaking to Grok the other day, and they claimed that through Grok, they found out that there was a 70% conservative bias on Twitter. Grok had revealed that Twitter had been programmed to bias the conservative worldview by 70% to 30%. And that certainly seems to be the case from my experiences anecdotally. My threads are just overwhelmed by pro-reform, really pro kind of Russian or pro-isolationist political viewpoints. So many supposed British people saying how Keir Starmer is the most dishonest politician that's ever been, and they ask the same things every day. And you know, there's no way that someone who's like a loving mum and grandmother or whatever, and with a generic photo and the bio that looks real trollish, like they have the same kind of makeup. There's no way that you're just going to be obsessed with going onto Twitter every day and asking the same questions and attacking Keir Starmer just relentlessly 24/7. You're like, you have to be a troll. You just have to be a troll. So we need to be very, very careful. Like, Twitter is just full of trolls, and they're all asking the same sort of stuff, which is, you know, have you ever seen a worse UK Prime Minister than Sir Keir Starmer? He's so blah blah blah, and it's just like, oh, give over, honestly. But anyway, someone the other day on my threads was saying, well, you know, Keir Starmer was, I'm just having a look now. Okay, no, it doesn't matter. But he keeps tinkering, does Mr. Musk, with all of the algorithms that dictate what Twitter does. But anyway, someone was saying the other day that Keir Starmer he should have just sent David Lammy as foreign minister. Why is Keir Starmer, you know, wasting all his time at these foreign things? It's like, one, it was in frickin' London. Two, there were all sorts of other international leaders. Zelensky, Mette Frederiksen, Macron, I think, was there as well. You know, you can't just then deputize it to, you know, let David Lammy take over because I've got to look after domestic things, because he's getting all this hassle because he's spending too much time worrying about foreign affairs. It's like, this is pretty existential for democracy, for the rule of law, and for Europe as a whole. So yeah, I think it is worth Keir Starmer going abroad and trying to sort these things out. Thank you very much. And it is worth him going abroad to drum up economic prosperity for the country, because we're in a lot of trouble at the moment. So yeah, it was right that he was at the forefront, Starmer, with this. Anyway, that's just my pet peeve. Right, new 5-point plan for Ukraine was developed by the Coalition of the Willing by the end of the year. One, energy partners will work to ensure that the Russian oil and gas completely disappear from the global markets. 2, finance plans to unblock billions of euros of Russian assets to help Ukraine. Of course, that's what we talked about already, and there are problems with that one. 3, pressure on the Kremlin. Increase military support for Ukraine, including the transfer of long-range weapons. And in fact, do I have that? No, I think I've got it for my military aid video. So Zelensky came out yesterday and particularly thanked Keir Starmer and Macron for things, and he's thanking Keir Starmer for long-range weapons and air defense missiles as well. So Starmer is getting some props directly from Zelensky, and Macron is as well. So increased military support for Ukraine, including transfer of long-range weapons. 4, security, development of security guarantees, including the creation of a multinational force in Ukraine. And 5, arms deliveries announced by France and Britain. Right, so that's probably what Zelensky was reacting to as well. Okay, and the nice thing, and I know, you know, this has been and gone and it was days back, but it was kind of nice from a British point of view, and I guess from a Ukrainian point of view, to see Zelensky treated to the, you know, the proper welcome from the King of UK. Shows how small Charles is these days, as he's only marginally taller than Zelensky, who is knee-high to a grasshopper. Anyway, here we have bearskin-hatted military pomp and circumstance and loads of support from King Charles. So that's really good news. Like to see that. Zelensky says, I had a meeting with His Majesty King Charles III of the United Kingdom. I am grateful to His Majesty and to the entire United Kingdom for their unwavering support of our people, as well as for the strong public messages in support of Ukraine and the pursuit of peace of our country. So that's all good news. And that's that kind of soft power, soft PR that I think is really, really important. Right, okay, going just completely left field here, we're going to talk about Greek tankers. And we have just seeing that everything's all right in the live. So Greek tanker companies, which the Brookings Institution estimates transport a third of Russian oil, have begun to refuse work with Russian oil companies. Yes, because of Trump's sanctions, according to Reuters. Now, hopefully, these sanctions that the US has put in place that Trump has finally done here is really is Greg Terry just coming to hang out there. Leave us grasshoppers alone. Yeah, sorry to slightly shorter people than the norm. No offense, I'm not being heightist. Greg, if you want to come and join in the chat, you're always welcome. Let me know on the old what do you call it, WhatsApp. Right, so Greek tanker companies, which the Brookings Institution estimates transport a third of Russian oil, have begun to refuse to work with Russian oil companies because of Trump's sanctions. So that's really, really good news there. I'm loving that. I want these to be as successful as possible, these sanctions that Trump has put on. They've been a long time in coming, but now they're here. Bring it on. Okay. So now we are also starting to see Scott Bessent be a little bit more aggressive in his rhetoric and talking about Kirill Dmitriev in terms of being a propagandist. And I love it. I absolutely love it. I'm actually going to forward wine to the relevant bit here where she quotes Kirill Dmitriev, and Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, just says it how it should be said.
And when will Russia actually feel the pain?
Well, I think Russia is going to feel the pain immediately. I can tell you that we've already seen India has done a complete halt of Russian oil purchases. Many of the Chinese refineries have stopped. And, you know, Margaret, are you really going to publish what a Russian propagandist says? I mean, what else is he going to say? That, oh, it's going to be terrible and it's going to bring Putin to the table? Of course. The Russian economy is a wartime economy. Growth is virtually zero. Inflation, I believe, is over 20%. And everything we do is going to bring Putin to the table. It's oil that funds the Russian war machine, and I think we can make a substantial dent in his profits.
I understood you had some competing noise there, but just to be clear, Dmitriev is in the United States because sanctions were lifted on him to conduct meetings here, including with President Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff. When you say he's a propagandist, do you mean that we shouldn't listen to anything he says?
What do you think is going to happen to him if he goes back home and says the good Lord? You know, what if he had said on TV, this is terrible. President Trump just did the right thing. This is a maximum pressure campaign that's going to work. Margaret, what's he going to say? Of course he's going to say this. If you go through and look at every Russian talking point, they seem to use the word, we have immunized the economy against this. Well, they haven't immunized the economy. They're Oil earnings are down 20% year over year. I would suspect that this could take them down another 20 or 30%. So, again, that President Trump was criticized for not doing enough. He takes this bold maneuver, and then you're quoting a Russian propagandist.
I want to ask you, the U.S.
That is brilliant. That's what I want to hear. That's what I want to hear from Scott Persant. I want to hear the very clear sense that
Vladimir Putin's on
that Kirill Dmitriev is a propagandist, that they're trying to pull the wool over the American eyes. So yeah, lots of people talking about that interaction. Okay, Russia recognizes the independence of Ukraine, but several regions are already ours. They are included in the constitution, according to Sergei Lavrov. So the wily foreign minister comes out and says the usual propagandistic nonsense. I see him as no less a propagandist than Kirill Dmitriev. But it's absolutely outrageous that they say, imagine, I mean, this is my good old analogy, that I break into Doris's house, right? Poor old Doris. I break into a house next door, the old lady next door, and I just help myself to all of the belongings I can possibly fit into my booty sack. Right, I've got this bounty sack that's over my shoulder. I've got my stripy top on, and I've got my eye covering mask on. And I'm just about to get out the door, and the police come round, and I've got all of Doris's belongings that I could fit into my bag. And they say, hang on, hello, what's going on here, sunshine? What are you doing? And I say, well, this is all mine. This is all my stuff in here. This is all my stuff. All of the rest of that, that's Doris's. That's all her stuff over there. But this is my stuff in here. The police would go, you're a freaking thief, mate. Empty that sack and give it back to Doris. Thank you very much, you bloody lowlife. But Lavrov is like, oh, look at all this stuff in my sack. That's ours now. That's ours now. All that stuff. That's Ukraine. That's Ukraine. This is Russia. This is Russia. Anyway, I'm off. I've got it here. I put it in my sack. I'm off. I'm off down a pub. See you later, guys. It's ridiculous. Of course, you can't just steal bits of land and say it's ours now because it's in the Constitution. It's ours now. I put it in my sack. Just ridiculous. So Lavrov can take a long walk off a short pier, as far as I am concerned. Right. Okay. Sticking with the United States, as we were previously, the State Department's Internal Intelligence Agency cast doubt earlier this year on the notion that Putin was prepared to negotiate to an end to the war in Ukraine, dissenting from a more optimistic Central Intelligence Agency assessment of potential talks. This is fascinating. I've spent a lot of time over the last couple of days, last week or so, talking about these two worldviews from within the Trump administration, from within the whole American government, where I think the Trump administration is isolationist, MAGA, Project 2025, pro-Russia, anti-Ukraine by default. And you've got the Pentagon and intelligence services, and we can talk about this now then, and intelligence services kind of being generally kind of what you would expect them to be in terms of understanding how the world is working, understanding who Russia is as a nation, who Putin is, and who the bad guys are, and what's really going on in the war in Ukraine. And they're competing for the narrative and for decisions to be made that align with their kind of worldview. But saying the intelligence services, of course, there are many different intelligence services, and old Tulsi Gabbard is in charge of like 18 of them as Director of National Intelligence, and she is trying to purge people and get her own ideology diffused throughout these intelligence services. So who knows what's actually going on in the intelligence services? And here we have an example where the State Department, their internal intelligence agency, so that's like Marco Rubio's lot, I presume, are saying Putin ain't interested in peace at all. And you got the CIA now kind of more directly under the control of Tulsi Gabbard saying, "Well, no, I think Putin is up for a bit of peace." You know, I think there's chance that we could, we could see peace with Russia. Yeah, it's definitely on the cards. Two completely different analyses of a war and the political landscape that I think should clearly lead one to believe that Putin is not going to be up for peace. Like, my opinion here would be just prima facie that the CIA hasn't got a clue what they're talking about, because none of us would have, you know, most of us are just randos, right? On the street, we've got our own expertise, but we're not like intelligence operatives or diplomats or foreign policy experts, right? Some of you might be, but in the main, but all of us were like, yeah, Putin's not interested in peace. Like, none of us are under any illusions. Like, how can we have a better grasp on the situation than the CIA, right? What is going on there? And this is the kind of question I asked about Putin. Like, how did he invade in the first place, thinking that he was going to be, that the Russians were going to be welcomed with open arms and bunches of flowers? Like, how can you get it so wrong? So garbage in, garbage out. So what is going on in the CIA that they can get that so wrong? And it's interesting that there's a divergence here within the American government between agencies that probably should be making similar conclusions. But interesting there, interesting. Now, Die Welt has said, so German, yeah, Doris wants her weapons back. Yeah, in my sack, I was stealing some strategic bombers as well. Die Welt, Xi Jinping has refused to meet Friedrich Merz, so the German Chancellor is not being allowed to go to and meet with Xi Jinping, forcing Berlin to cancel Merz's planned China visit set for late October. Now, this could be seen as kind of a good thing, in a sense that I think Merz is being quite strong. He's being strong on Ukraine, right? And he's saying things that I like to hear, but he's not going to make friends, particularly in that sphere of thinking in that part of the world, like BRICS, for example. So, you know, he's going to town on how Russia are the bad guys and they are at fault for this war. So it doesn't surprise me at all that China might stick two fingers up to Merz and tell him to go, you know, send him packing. So the snub is seen as a diplomatic embarrassment for Merz's new government, who had hoped to reset ties with Beijing. And the problem here, though, is what you want to do is knock a wedge between China and Russia. And the US are able to do this because they are economic juggernauts. And when they sanction Lukoil and Rosneft and then put pressure on China and India for secondary sanction purposes, then actually people sit up straight, because it's, as I say, an economic juggernaut. It's a much bigger country in terms of population than Germany, and has a bigger GDP, and dollar is the international trading currency, and so, yeah, this is could well be a bit of a setback for the Germans there. We shall see how that develops. Right, now on to Georgia. So Marika Mikiashvili, I advise you, if you've not seen it already, go and check out my interview of Marika Mikiashvili. I should interview her again. I think I'll do that. I'm going to reach out to her because A, she's awesome, and B, there's quite a lot still going on in Georgia. They are still protesting. They changed the law that you can get arrested for blocking Rustaveli Avenue, which is a central road in Tbilisi, in the capital. And they started nicking people off the pavements of Rustaveli Avenue and locking up, and they locked up loads of people in the last few days. But despite, as Mikiashvili says, despite incredible scales of arrests over closing the road was once again closed today, day 331 of the protests. This is fantastic. So it's good news. 11 months of Georgian protests against the government. They're starting to disappear people now, though. Yeah, and that's the problem. I do worry. I do worry that yeah, it's a dangerous thing to do, isn't it? To protest, you end up going to prison, and you know, you might say, oh, yeah, everyone should stand up for democracy and this and that, but you know, imagine you've got 3 young children at home that are depending on you for income, and if you get locked up in prison and you're a single mum, or you know, you're the bread maker or whatever, and like you're thinking, well, I'd love to stand up for democracy, but if I do, then my children go hungry, or so on and so forth. My house gets repossessed, stuff like this. So I'm not saying that I would or wouldn't do this myself, but all I'm saying is that we need to be careful when we judge people for their actions or inactions, because real life is difficult. But anyway, that said, it's absolutely brilliant to see this. So people have cleared the road and activists have calmly moved back to the sidewalk. It's hard to move. The sidewalk is packed. Roosevelt Avenue was blocked for about 25 minutes. Day 331 of uninterrupted protests in 8+ cities across Georgia. Fantastic. Adam Kinzinger, though, says Republican donor has been lobbying in favor of anti-Western Georgian dream, according to Reuters. So again, like, it's easy, I guess, for me. It's easy for people to accuse me of being like having TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, but essentially I am just anti-democracy. And when it seems that so many Republican lawmakers like Anna Paulina Luna, who was meeting with Kirill Dmitriev and all sorts of others, are saying things continually that are so in line with either Russia directly or autocracy and autocratic regimes, people that you know fawn over Viktor Orban. You're like, hang on, you've been telling us for decades that you're all about, you know, small government and this and that and freedom and liberty, and it's all about, yeah, the Statue of Liberty stands for freedom, and I have freedom written all over my t-shirts and this and that, and Charlie Kirk and his freedom thingy, and etc., etc., etc. And then you're advocating for autocracies. You're advocating for Georgian Dream. You're advocating for Viktor Orban. It's like you are not, ideology means nothing to you, really. It's just, you know, you want to virtue signal these things, but you don't believe that. You don't adhere to it. So the key points here is Republican donor Steve Nicandros lobbied against legislation targeting Georgian Dream, a letter shows. So this is probably that what's the begins with M, what's that big bit of legislation? Anyway, can't find it there, but you know the one, the pro freedom in Georgia legislation that's been struggling to get through Congress and whatnot. Can't find it there. Trying to look down it. Anyway, I'm only going to read you out the summary here. Legislation sponsor Republican Representative Joe Wilson, who's good, by the way, expresses frustration over Nicandros's activities. Georgian Dream criticized roundly for Democratic backsliding and its relationship with Moscow. So, yeah, a political donor with business interests in the country of Georgia has privately lobbied lawmakers in recent weeks against legislation that would pressure the nation's anti-Western ruling party, angering a high-ranking congressional Republican and aggravating a growing fight on Capitol Hill over policy toward the major Russian trading partner. A bipartisan group of lawmakers has been struggling to pass legislation to punish the increasingly authoritarian Moscow-leaning government in Tbilisi, even as US President Donald Trump has shown a growing willingness to pressure the Kremlin over its war in Ukraine, slapping major Russian oil companies with sweeping sanctions on Wednesday. Anyway, there you go. Just really bleeding frustrating. I'm just trying to find what that bill is called because it's going to annoy the heck out of me. I do have a problem sometimes with my memory, so apologies, peeps. But it's something like the what's it called? Do none of you know in the live chat? No. Anyway, it's that Georgian US legislation. I'm going to Google it. American legislation, Georgia democracy. Come on, AI, you can tell me. Megabari Act. So that's it. It's the Megabari Act. This is it. So US lawmakers passed the Megabari Act targeting threats to Georgia's democracy, although I don't think it's properly passed and whatnot because it's May the 6th, 2025. So I think it's still struggling to get through the whole of Congress. Anyway, There you go. That's what it's talking about. Right. Okay. In what I think is really good news for the Trump administration, or for Ukraine, is when you see. So we've heard Scott Bessant saying the right thing about Kirill Dmitriev, and this is good. That's what you want to see. Proper big players in the Trump administration. In that case, the Treasury Secretary. Here we've got the ambassador to NATO, Whitaker, saying things are also really positive for, I think, Ukraine.
Your reaction first to the Hungarian foreign minister from the last block. He indicated that the White House is giving Hungary a pass on Russian oil. It's not exactly the picture we've gotten from the White House. Is the U.S. respecting geography when it comes to Hungary, as the minister put it?
No, I mean, what's really happening is our expectation is that countries like Hungary, Turkey, and Slovakia that continue to buy Russian oil and gas will come up with a plan and execute a plan that weans them off of Russian oil and gas. And, you know, Hungary, unlike many of their neighbors, has not made any plans or made any active steps. And so we're going to continue to work with them, and we're going to continue to work with their neighbors like Croatia and other countries that can help them wean themselves off. And, you know, obviously that pipeline is most likely to be shut off in the coming years as well. And so there's a lot of planning that our friends in Hungary should do. And we're going to help them, obviously, as a good ally, make those plans and execute them to get them off of Russian oil and gas.
Your reaction.
The reason why I think Grunge thing, Ronnie here is saying Hungwell toilets. Matthew Whitaker, who's a guy that's just been speaking as the ambassador to NATO, was famous for a couple of years ago, before he was in this position, before he was in the administration. They called big boy toilets. It was designed toilets for people who are well hung men. I presume when you're sitting down. I don't know. Anyway, that's the sort of guy that they put in charge. But having said that, recently Whitaker has been right on the money by saying the correct things, which is putting pressure on Hungary, Slovakia, and Turkey here. But these are three nations that Trump is a big fan of, because he likes the strong man in Erdogan in Turkey, he likes the strong man in Orban in Hungary, and Slovakia too. Yeah, Robert Fico, but here Whitaker is saying, no, we need to put pressure on these guys to come up with alternatives to Russian hydrocarbons. And that's brilliant. I'm here for it. That's absolutely what we want to see. Okay, so now we're kind of segueing on to discussions of actually one more thing about that. So US Ambassador to NATO Matthew Whitaker rejected Hungary's claims that its landlocked status leaves the country with no choices but to rely on Russian oil, because actually other nations are landlocked and they don't have a problem. So that segues on to talking more about Hungary. So we've got a bit of a Hungarian section now. We have Max25 saying Bloomberg's reporting that Orban has said he plans to meet with Trump next week to discuss the impact of the new sanctions on Russian oil companies. Hungary, which has increased its dependence on Russian energy, fears energy risks from the restrictions. So they are panicking. He's going to meet with Trump. But of course, you know, you had Kirill Dmitriev go across to the US to try and meet with, well, at least Trump's envoy there. And I think come away somewhat empty-handed, but I don't really know what happened under the radar. He obviously met with Anna Paulina Luna, and has influence with people in the administration. But I don't know that any change took place in policy. I don't know if Viktor Orban is going to manage to create any difference of policy there. He might get an exemption for a little bit of time or something like that. I don't know. It'd be nice if Trump actually was strong to Orban, because it's really important that Hungarian electors, as in the voters, see Orban as not this like super strong leader that can go to the United States and get the United States to bend to Orban's demands, because then he can go back to Hungary and say, look how good I am as a leader. I would really like Trump to stand up strong to Hungary and to Orban and say, no, mate, you need to sort it out. I've been nice enough to you for too long. But the problem is that the Project 2025 is so deeply ingrained, or so deeply connected to Orban, to the regime there in Hungary, and therefore to Russia. I think, Orban appearing at CPAC, getting invites to Mar-a-Lago and getting the red carpet treatment. I think the connections, what Project 2025 is doing as a Heritage Foundation think tank blueprint for Trump's administration, they were taking the Orban playbook, and there is an Orbanization, as many people are saying, an Orbanization of the American political system. And they are doing what Orban has done over 10, 15 years or whatever, and what Erdogan has done as well. And they have accelerated that. They've expedited that to now it's 10 months. And the US has gone even further, arguably, than Orban managed to do. So will Trump stand up to Orban? I don't know, because Orban does have, I think, a special place ideologically in the White House because of Project 2025. F oink. So we have our lovely Hungarian in the house. F oink. Right. Okay. Okay. No, not saying anything. Someone's saying what? Someone was jokingly saying to F oink, who's Hungarian, what gives you such knowledge about what's going on in Hungary? But it's a joke because he knew he was Hungarian. Right. Anyway. Now, I like this. John Cleese. I'm loving John Cleese at the moment. He's getting involved quite a lot in the war in Ukraine, but also the geopolitics surrounding that, and European geopolitics and American geopolitics as well. And I'm here for it. I'm loving some Monty Python legend having some opinions that I completely agree with. Anyway, John Cleese here says, why on earth is this not being reported properly in the West? What is he talking about? This is really moving. In Budapest Hero Square, so you remember the other day, and I reported on this in my last geopolitics video, but it's worth going back to, we had the Republic Day march of Orban. So every year there's a Republic Day, I presume, in Hungary. And he marched in a very much organized by the regime, by the Fidesz party, or by Orban, and behind a banner that said, we don't want to die for Ukraine. So the whole Republic Day was actually couched in an anti-Ukraine or kind of pro-peace, but really anti-Ukraine manner. And he went on that march took place. And, that was trying to sell the idea that the Hungarian people are behind peace and behind not supporting Ukraine. But then after that, there was an opposition march in Budapest, went to Heroes Square, and it was much bigger and much more effective, I think. So this is really moving, says Alex Taylor. In Budapest Heroes Square, Hungary's opposition leader, Peter Magyar, calls on the spirit of 1956 Hungarian uprising against Russia and its thirst for freedom to defeat Orban in front of hundreds of thousands.
Magyarok, akik a hazá...
And what he did, I think it was 56 seconds.
Emlékezzünk a forradalom hőseire.
Of silence in Heroes Square.
Pillanat, az új nemzeti megbékélés kezdete is.
And a really powerful sort of 56 seconds of silence. Sometimes silence is more powerful than words. And yeah, it's really good. So Peter Magyar, he himself on Twitter saying, when 56 seconds of silence speak louder than any words, it was an indescribable feeling when a crowd of, and I will actually play that. I know I won't. I was wondering if that's a silent bit. Indescribable feeling when a crowd of hundreds of thousands stood in complete silence in honor of our 1956 heroes, and then the bells began to ring. It was the most iconic moment since the 1989 regime change, contributing to the transformation of 2026. So let's find that bit. Sorry, wasn't showing the right one. Huge crowds. Really impressive.
Tisztelt emlékező magyarok!
Now, this kind of event is insanely important because it might well define the future of the European Union. It really is that important. You know, John Cleese saying, why on earth is this not being reported properly in the West? Like, if I was doing the foreign news segment on BBC News or Sky News or whatever, I'd be definitely reporting on this and saying, you know, this could be the turning point of the EU in terms of, you know, having an Eurosceptic right-wing populist in a, you know, ethno-nationalist in the form of Viktor Orban. This could be a sign that he will not win the next election. And if he doesn't win the next election, then the European unity is going to be secured. And then support for, you know, unanimous or much more of a united support for Ukraine will be secured. I mean, it is super, super, super important. Here, totally ignored by Western media, says Janky, some of the largest protests in Hungary's history just occurred. The Russian-backed Orban regime has a total media blackout on it for a reason. And here you have, I'm going to turn the sound off, but here just to show you some more kind of images of the size of the crowds that were marching against Viktor Orban, really, and his regime, and in quite a big contrast to the much smaller crowds that were marching, and I think were much more organized, less organic than these sorts of protests. So you saw, I think, the coaches that they coached people in on for the Orban march previously, etc., etc. So anyway, I think that's really good news to see. And then we are going to go to another source here, Adrian P., a Romanian source, saying you'll see Orban and pro-Russia crowd sharing footage from a rally this morning about peace, which basically translates to surrender Ukraine to Russia. Now the opposition has gathered in the afternoon with the largest protest in Hungary's modern history against how Orban and his cronies and their robbing of the Hungarian economy. Stay informed. Hungarians hate Orban and he's toast. Well, I hope so. Like I keep telling you, the challenge for democracy and for Peter Magyar and the Tisza party in Hungary is how much Orban is able to rig the elections, both in a soft manner and a hard manner. The soft manner being, you know, dictating what state television says and the media is able to say with regard to reporting on the party, so that there's a massive bias towards the Fidesz party and the Orban regime from what you listen to and what you read and what you watch. That's a kind of soft rigging, and all the other sorts of things to do with that. And then the hard rigging of things like election mechanics and the voting system and so on and so forth. So I hope that the EU is gearing up to be able to have really good oversight, maybe with the OSCE or whoever it is, oversight of the elections in Hungary, so that the right thing takes place and there is a free and fair election in spring of next year. Now, before I continue with more Hungarian news, I want to also make a massive apology for this morning. You know me, I don't like to spread misinformation, or certainly I don't want to disinform you. And if I make erroneous claims, I do need to correct them, because this is serious for me. And I need to own up where I get things wrong. And one of my most egregious mistakes was this morning when I was showing a video of Anna Paulina Luna, and she was dressing up how wonderful her meeting with Kirill Dmitriev was. And there was a song in the background, and it was Here Comes the Sun. And I said, do you know what? I'm sure that Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel will not be happy about this. And of course, it wasn't Simon and Garfunkel, it's the freaking Beatles. And that I got that wrong. I think I owe you all a massive apology. So for that, I am truly sorry, and I will work to be better than I am presently. And I should never, ever make that kind of egregious mistake again. It was not Simon and Garfunkel, it was the Beatles. Now I've put that straight, we can continue. Right. Hungary is working on how to circumvent US sanctions on Russian oil companies Lukoil and Rosneft. PM Orban says the MOL refineries process 14.2 million tons of Russian crude oil annually via the Druzhba pipeline. So they're going to work out ways around this, while at the same time speaking to Trump to see what exemptions they can get. Thank you very much. Apology is thankfully accepted. I am nothing if not a Philistine. You are quite correct. Anyway, my flabber has never been more gusted. I like that. Okay, right. Apology accepted. These bridges over troubled waters. I see what you did there. I see what you did. By the way, but Doris was the fifth Beatles. She was in the Beatles. Most of you don't know that. I go around and speak to her all the time about how she was singing such songs like The Sound of Silence and all sorts. I see what I did there. Right, okay, we must move on. Ukrainian billionaire Rinat Akhmetov has bid to acquire Romania's largest steel plant, Libertu Galati, adapting and expanding despite the war. Interesting. Yeah, so we have a Ukrainian billionaire there buying into Romania's largest steel plant. I don't think it is, yeah, it's a debt-ridden giant, but that's interesting. So could be securing jobs in Romania. As a Ukrainian comes to secure jobs in Romania, then that generates support for Ukraine in Romania, and then could help to get steel into Ukraine. It could just be a bit of a genius move there, but I don't know if I'm reading too much into that. Now, I want to very interesting, said who's popping, as Russia's state steel producer is in big trouble. Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Goose Springsteen, by the way, and I should be better. I'm weak, I'm an ignorant. Cheers, mate. So Peter Jukes here saying, do populists always crash the economy? Well, on average, and this I'm not going to go into the full article here, though I would love to. Do populists always crash the economy? Well, stats are in, it seems, and this is it's looking like they generally aren't very good for the economy. So between December 2023, as an example, so this is Javier Milei in Argentina. We're going to talk about Argentina later. But as an example, between December 2023 and July 2025, 18,000 businesses have closed and 253,800 registered jobs have been lost, according to the Center for Argentine Political Economy. So, you know, is this what happens under populist regimes or populist governments? And it appears that generally this is the case. So on average after 15 years, GDP per head, so gross domestic product per capita, tends to be 10% lower in countries run by populist leaders than in similar economies with more mainstream regimes. So as a data point, that's pretty interesting. So we can criticize populist regimes on the back of ideology and whatnot, but actually if you want to put pounds in your pocket, then it's probably correct to criticize them on that too. Now, talking about populist leaders, dear Nigel Farage, the Albanian PM Edi Rami. Now, Edi Rami is I do like him. I just want to play this.
Some call them small boats, some call them Brexit boats, and one wonders why you left Europe. You left Europe because you wanted less boats, and you have more boats. You left Europe because you wanted more investment. You have less investment. You left Europe because you wanted more happiness. Now you are depressed. So, you know, welcome to the Balkan Club.
Well,
I love that. He's the Albanian leader. He seems like a really he's a character, and actually very close to the Blair administration. Rami, he took a lot of how Tony Blair got into government in 1997, and then has taken that to Albania and whatnot. So I know Alistair Campbell's very close as a Labour kind of head honcho with, or he used to be with Edi Rami. So anyway, interesting. Now, it's quite fascinating to me that you're starting to see an awful lot more talk about, and in fact, there was a Spanish newspaper today talking about you are seeing the UK government, Labour government, pivot towards attacking Brexit as causing many of the economic woes in the UK at the moment, because they're under a lot of pressure from reform. So they need to change the narrative. You are going to see this an awful lot, but also just in general, there are so many more people owning up more officially to the costs, to the financial costs of Brexit to the UK. And those chickens have come home to roost. And it's really interesting. I think there's a piece by Liz Webster talking about how it is, all the costs that have taken their toll on the UK, that the fear mongers so I've got a baby knocking on a door over there. The fear mongering that people like David Cameron and the Remain campaign did in 2016 to try and scare people not to vote for Leave, and people saying this is just fear mongering, and then a couple of years later they're like, it's not come true, you were just lying, it was all fear mongering. It now has all come true, and actually people are pointing out it was even worse than, so all the statistics are looking worse than the initial fear mongering in 2016 from the Remain campaign. In other words, it wasn't fear mongering, it was prescient, and it was accurate, and it's what it has happened. So we are getting less investment, we are getting, this has been hit, we are getting less tax revenue, everything is looking pretty precarious economically speaking, and you can trace a lot of that back to Brexit. So anyway, just the last thing I'm going to say in this video about Brexit is you are going to see more conversation about this in public spaces. So people who criticize me for keeping on relitigating Brexit in my videos and whatnot, but the reason I do that is A, because you need to explain why we've got to where we are, and B, because it has had this effect and people didn't think it was going to have that effect or claimed it wasn't, blah blah blah, and actually it is now a lot more part of the conversation, and that's also because the surveys are showing that the majority of people want to rejoin now, which is very interesting. And then you've got reform looking like they're going to sweep the next general election, although that's some years away. But if that keeps on going, then you might get the next British general election being a relitigation or rerun of 2016. And it could be because it could be that Labour decides that actually they need to differentiate themselves from whoever else, and they go pro-rejoin over the next couple of years because they lose by-elections and they're losing in the polls. So they think, how do we wrest back that narrative? We need some more populist economic policies, and you might get Brexit becoming one of the central, along with immigration as ever, immigration and Brexit becoming part of the central political discourse in the United Kingdom. Honestly, so and I will keep talking about it because everyone else is talking about it, because it's right there. Okay, a little bit from the US now, and it's absolutely staggering. It's looking like NASA is going to be cut, and this might have all sorts of different implications. Honestly, huge implications. Things like mobile phones were developed on the back of technology that came from NASA and the amount of R&D that takes place from a state level within the United States. And it looks like people were predicting this because you had Elon Musk at the center of the American administration, Doge and all that. He has his own SpaceX, and then you've got Jeff Bezos vying for Blue Voyager or whatever, his Blue Origin, whatever it is. And NASA, I think, they're not long for the world. And Bill Nye here saying that Trump's NASA cuts that are potentially going to be proposed are extinction level. The White House wants to slash science missions by up to 47%, gutting Earth monitoring. Again, it's all to do with climate change as well. If we don't monitor the Earth's temperature, then we don't know it's getting hotter. So then, therefore, climate change isn't happening. Oh, that's all right. Bury our heads in the sand. And sorry, I had to wave to a baby. Hello. So yeah. Anyway, sorry about that. It's just exactly what Trump did, as I've told you before, with the vaccinations, which is we're going to stop COVID testing, because if we don't test people, then we don't know if they've got COVID, and we don't know if they've got COVID, then it's looking like COVID is going down. It's not a problem. Okay, well, a bit of an issue there. So that was his approach in the COVID pandemic, and it's the same with climate change. It's like, well, if we don't know it's happening, then maybe it's not happening, and we don't have to do anything to mitigate against it. And then I get lobbied from fossil fuel industries, and hey, happy days, I'm making loads of money. And by the way, crypto. So this isn't belt tightening, Nye warned, it's self-sabotage. America's leadership in space is on the line. So really interesting. Well, it's not interesting, it's the wrong word. I think it's absolutely criminal what's going on in the Trump administration. It really, really is. Right, a little bit on boats being attacked and blown up, as we've seen. And I've commented on this loads. I'm not going to, again, relitigate this, but it is it is illegal. So Trump says on the boat attacks that land is going to be next. Now, I heard this morning that this is very important for geopolitics. We need to understand this, because actually this might well have a huge impact on Ukraine and the US support for Ukraine, because there are more ships in American warships in the Caribbean in that sector at the moment than since the Cuban Missile Crisis. Like, that is how serious things are getting with Venezuela. And he keeps blowing up boats, or the Trump administration keeps blowing up boats illegally. Now, it might have some impact, might well have impact on the trade of drugs in the area. But it's a bit like sending the army into cities. It's like, we don't want the army in cities. Yeah, you're going to have crime going down. But then what happens after the army goes? You're going to go back up. So then you're just going to keep the army in a city the whole time? Are we becoming a military state? Okay, we blow up all these ships, and without even knowing fully whether they are definitely drug trafficking boats, we blow up all these boats willy-nilly because you've called them terrorists, because you changed the rules, and you've made Tran de Aragua and all these other groups, these cartels, you've nominated, you've called them terrorists, and so you say, so now we can blow them up. So we're blowing up all these boats, and then is that what we want going forward, where you can just blow up people you don't like willy-nilly the entire time? What's really going on here is this trying to get a response from Venezuela, because you want the oil in Venezuela and possibly Guyana as well. So you want Venezuela to react so that you can then strike back. You've got all of your ships out there. You've got America. We talk about how Russian planes fly over airspaces and try and probe and prod and provoke NATO. Well, the US is apparently doing that with Venezuela themselves. They're flying very close and just trying to prod and probe and provoke the Venezuelans to reacting. And if the Venezuelans react, then the US goes to war with Venezuela. And why? Because oil. Why? Because money. And then you're thinking, well, what impact would that have on Ukraine? Would they just completely take their eye off Ukraine, divert all of their attention to supporting their own military endeavors in Venezuela, say, well, we can't give you these weapons, we can't even sell these weapons to NATO allies because we need them for the US to fight in Venezuela. So we need to watch out here. Like these strikes on boats are I think indicative of something much bigger that's going on. Now, Trump has said very clearly, he said, I think we're just going to kill people that are bringing drugs into our country. They're going to be like dead. Brilliant. So that is Trump admitting to a war crime, because you can't just kill drugs runners. Like, you might think you can, and you might think, oh, on balance, that's good. But actually, it's not the rule of law. That is what you do in war with people in uniforms of the opposite side. You just kill them because that's war. But you can't just kill pickpockets, and you can't just kill I don't know, someone committing white collar fraud in government, because then you would kill the entire Trump administration. So where do you draw the line on what bad guys you kill? Because I'm fairly sure you'd have to kill your family because of all the corruption they've just been doing on the back of your presidency. So, it's easy to say, well, it's good that these narco peeps are dead. Well, yeah, maybe you can make some kind of consequentialist moral calculation like that. But then actually, in the long term, that consequentialist moral calculation would flip, because then you are giving the green light for a Trump administration or any American administration to kill whoever they don't like without appealing to international law, domestic law, or habeas corpus, the kind of due process. If you are doing away with due process, then your political enemies become as dead as your narco enemies. This is so freaking dangerous. Honestly, I cannot believe more is not being made of this. The fact that Donald Trump is just advocating just striking, blowing up boats in the Caribbean. It's absolutely incredible. Steve Bannon here saying, well, I don't really want to listen to too much of Steve Bannon, but Trump will be president in 2028 and get a third term. People ought to get accommodated with that. What about the Constitution? He's a vehicle of divine providence. In other words, yeah, we don't really need to think about the Constitution. Trump is going to rule for a further term if Steve Bannon and the peeps have got anything to do with it. Now, there was a leak of a document the other day from, this is coming back to me. Was it a CPAC conference document? They're literally talking about him, how he gets to rule for a third term. So this is no longer just fringe people thinking about it. Everything is being laid out at the moment. Project 2025, unified executive theory, everything that they're doing in the Trump administration is moving towards Trump ruling for a third term. And that looks rather like dictatorship. That looks like a king just ruling for as long as he wants. Be damned with the Constitution. Constitution be damned. Okay. And in case you don't think that Trump wants this is Trump talking about it.
Well, we have great people. I don't have to get into that, but we have one of them standing right here. We have JD, obviously. The vice president is great. I think Marco's great. I think, I'm not sure if anybody would run against us. I think if they ever formed a group, it would be unstoppable. I really do. I believe that. I would love to do it. I have my best numbers ever. It's very terrible. I have my best numbers. If you read it.
So he says, in case you couldn't hear that, he said, I would love to do it, run for a third term. I have the best numbers ever. And of course, he doesn't. He's literally got the worst numbers of any president at this stage of their first term or second term. He's literally got the worst numbers, like the exact opposite of what he's saying. He says, I've got the best numbers anywhere, ever. Like, what numbers are you looking at? Like, have you got dyscalculia? Like, what is going on here? So he is just laying it up for a third term. End of. Right. Anyway, he's nuked. I mean, I think, what was this? Was this HIMARS? I think that was an Iskander-M ballistic missile that took out the east wing of the White House. And of course, he said, Caroline Leavitt said nothing will be torn down. And he said on camera, it won't interfere with the current building. It pays total respect to the existing building, which I'm the biggest fan of. He says it will touch it. It might just touch it, or whatever else he said. And of course, he's nuked the east wing there. Absolutely incredible. Now, this is where we get properly worried about dictatorship. We know that CNN, which is owned by Warner Bros., which is looking like it might be taken over by Skydance Paramount. We know that CBS has just had Barry Weiss put in charge because they had that court case. CBS paid inordinate amounts of money to Trump directly. Then they had this merge between Paramount and Skydance. Skydance is owned by Larry Ellison, big Trump supporter and donor to the Republicans. So then CBS is going to be compromised as a news outlet, and now they're looking at taking over Warner Brothers that owns CNN. So CNN is looking like it might become the plaything of the Republican Party. Now, CNN's CEO, Mark Thompson, has recently been to the White House for a meeting, and he's told staff to ease off on coverage of Trump demolishing the East Wing of his ballroom after visiting the White House himself. Another outlet obeying in advance, off the cliff we go. This is how, as Timothy Schneider, the historian and author, says in his book on tyranny, number one is obey in advance. You start doing in advance what you think the administration want you to do, and blah blah blah. You know, that's your route towards dictatorship. It is super scary. Yes. So there you go. Right. What's happened overnight? Well, the Argentinian elections have taken place, and they have ended up seeing the anarcho-capitalist Javier Milei winning a congressional majority. Oh no, he's not quite a congressional majority. Results fall short of giving him a congressional majority, but he did better than was expected. Javier Milei hails a tipping point as his far-right party wins Argentina's midterm elections. Now, this is pretty worrying, because really what happened is, like, economically, they are in a lot of trouble. But what happened is Trump's administration funded $40 billion in aid to Argentina just before the election. So, as Adam Kinzinger, former Republican lawmaker, says, we're giving $40 billion to Argentina. That's $5 billion more than the entire US aid budget that Doge cut. We're giving that to Argentina. And here, Patriot Take says, a $40 billion bailout just before the election is foreign election interference. I mean, you can make a good case that the United States has just interfered in a foreign election by giving $40 billion to the Malay government just before the election. So he can say, look, hey, we're not in trouble. We've got big friends here and everything's hunky-dory, thanks to the US. And they get $40 billion. But it's interesting. So lots of people not happy with this, even in the MAGA world, where they've called out the United States or the Trump administration for not being America first, for being MAGA, standing for Make Argentina Great Again. You can't make this up, says Alex Cole. The same crowd who mocked foreign aid just rebranded it as patriotism. So I'm not going to play you this whole 2-minute interview clip, but Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, when questioned on this, like, is it right that we're bailing out Argentina? And he says it's America first. So giving Argentina $40 billion is America first because we're supporting a US ally. So how can Ukraine wasn't America first? How can MAGA was saying we shouldn't be giving money to Ukraine because we are America first, but money to Argentina is fine because they're an ally? So that is America first. Well, surely Ukraine was an ally. I mean, that's the point. Anyway, someone's making a lot of money off this, surely. Well, let's have a look at that. Trump, we made a lot of money on that Argentina election. Oh, Trump says we made a lot of money. Right, okay. Oh, fair enough.
Wow, what a great question that is. I love that question because that was a big win in Argentina. I want to congratulate the victor, and he was a big victor. And
he can't remember his name. I want to congratulate the victor.
Congratulate the victor, and he was a big victor, and he had a lot of help from us. He had a lot of help. I gave him an endorsement, very strong endorsement. Wow.
So Trump's 40 billion Argentina bailout, strategic gamble or political favor. Milei celebrates victory in Argentina's elections. I'm the king of the lost world. Trump says Milei had a lot of help from the US for Argentina election win. So Reuters sets their headline, Trump says Milei had a lot of help from the US for Argentina's election. That's election interference, I would argue. Trump takes credit for Milei's win after he meddled, sending Argentina 40 billion only if he wins, and says that they may send more as they make market share from our farmers, as they take market share. Ask yourself who is we, hint it's not you. So I didn't realize it was conditional. So they would only get that 40 billion if Milei won. That's even more obvious in its interference, because you're saying to the electors, well, you get $40 billion from the US if you vote for Milei. If you don't vote for Milei, you don't get $40 billion of a bailout, and we're in even more economic problems that were exacerbated by Milei being in, by the way. Oh my goodness. That's a crazy world that we live in. Anyway, that's probably enough of me talking about the crazy world. So thank you, Rob, for joining. I'm just about to finish. I've got to go and see my missus, who's just got back from work. It's half term, but she had to go back into school. She works in the school. My boys have been here all day. So there you go. Oh, that's why I'm saying that, because this next week, my output might be a little bit funky due to my boys being around, and boys. Right, so I've got my thanks to make. I'm going to start at the end. I'm going to start with the pirate saying, giving some Norwegian love here to your little whiskey shop fund. Mark from the little whiskey shop is in the live thread. I just want to let you know this, Mark. I like the white port that you guys stock, and I keep buying it. We had some the other night, me and my missus, and we haven't started you beautifully gave me a 40-year-old port, you guys and the whole team, like Jonathan Fink, Benny Pye, JR, Dan Smith, and Pierre. You were so generous and gave me that 40-year-old port. I don't know when to have that, probably at Christmas time. I should, or some big Ukrainian thing. But that white port, I had it with my missus, and just like, I absolutely love it. So I'm going to have that again. Anyway, you don't need to know that. Thanks, Zeb. Really appreciate it. 5 ATP Geopolitics membership. Super, super generous. Thank you, Zeb. Always so kind. Buy Greg a pint on my behalf. Greg didn't come back for more. He didn't contact me. At the eye doctor. No, he has just, or would have joined in. Greg, thanks, man. So good luck at the eye doctor. Johnny Nevergard with some Norwegian love. Thank you, dude. Really appreciate you always. The pirate, again, love these live ATP vids. Love the interaction. You guys are the best team the world could ever want in terms of being an awesome set of YouTube dudes and dudettes. Kevin Force, thank you for your ATP Geopolitics membership gifts. You are super, super generous. I need to do more for the members. You members are amazing. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You are brilliant. F-Oink, Hungary has access to the Adriatic pipeline through Croatia. So this is one of the options that Hungary has, actually. It isn't just that they're landlocked and there are no options. There are options through Croatia, and that is where some in, I think, the EU and others have been trying to, influence them. Thank you, Goose. Really appreciate your support, matey. You got some questions coming. To err is human, to correct is divine. Thank you, F-Oink, as I was correcting my musical errors from earlier. Right. Goose says, for all this weirdness, I think Milei deserves credit. He's pro-Ukraine, and Argentina has been a basket case for 70 plus years. I would give you this, Goose. It is complicated. So Argentina is in a hot mess economically, and that's not altogether to do with him at all. Actually, he was in a hot mess before he took over, and he said, I'm going to take over. It will be painful at first and then it will get better. But the problem is, it was painful at first. Things did get slightly better with some metrics, and then it's all gone Pete Tong again. It's all gone wrong again. So he is slashing and burning, and there's also corruption, and his own family's involved in corruption in there. So I think he's not a good person to have in charge. I think he is probably going to be prone to corruption, and he's a populist leader. And I just think there are all the recipes for disaster there. Helping them rebalance and stay Western aligned will be a long-term dividend. And actually, so you're correct here. So there is an argument that what the US is doing is trying to keep Argentina on side with regard to the encroachment of China. And you can make that argument. It's just, if I was a soybean farmer in the United States, I would be spitting at the American administration at the moment, because they have basically prioritized Argentinian soybean farmers over American soybean farmers in a very kind of overt and obvious way. Here's a $40 billion bailout. And by the way, China's buying soybeans from Argentina, and they're not buying from the US because we put tariffs on. So we're going to tariff you, and we're going to take money that we've got from the tariffs, and then we're going to give it to Argentina. So we've implemented a policy that taxes the electorate, and as a result screws over the soybean farmers. And the reason our farmers are screwed over, the money from the reason that we screwed over the farmers, we're going to then benefit your competitors, and you're screwed over because China aren't buying them from you, and now we're going to help China to buy them even more from Argentina. So yes, I understand the geopolitical decision making that might underwrite some of what the US is doing with regard to Argentina. I also think there are people in the Trump White House that are making money, and there are I forget who it is. I was hoping it'd be on this thread. I was reading an analysis of the people that are making money out of helping out Argentina. So I think there's corruption going on there, as well as there might be some geopolitical strategizing. So it is complicated, and I'll grant you that. Goose, it's hard to disentangle Brexit's economic consequences from COVID. Somewhat true, although some good analysis have controlled for that. I don't doubt that there are consequences, but it's not clear cut. I think they are quite clear cut. Actually, I would disagree that they are clear cut. You can look at pre-Brexit, and you can look at pre-COVID, and you can look at the direction of travel, and you can look at the effects of COVID on other European nations, on us, and you can control for this, and it is still bad. I think if you want to be as generous to Brexit as possible, you can go and do that, and you might want to do that. But I would say that I think the economic jury is definitely in on Brexit, and it because it never could be good. I go back to what I've told you a million times, is that there was no way that you could come out the biggest trading bloc in the world and have to renegotiate every single trade deal from a weaker position than being in the trade bloc, and attract inward investment into the UK rather than into the EU. There's just no way that you can do that. And for all our businesses with our closest trade partners suffering, like you speak to Mark from the little whiskey shop, he had to stop. He stopped exporting to the EU because of Brexit. Like, he's a conservative, like yourself, Goose, and he's a very much Conservative Party guy, very strong in support of Ukraine. But it was actually Remainer, because he I presume a lot because he could see the economic impact it was going to have on his business and on many other businesses. Go and follow Liz Webster on Twitter and Blue Sky. She's a farmer person, like the NFU, the National Farmers Union, were very clear about the impact of Brexit on our farming communities, on our farming industry in the UK. But most farmers were pro-Brexit because rural communities don't like immigration, blah, 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 generally. So actually most farmers voted against the EU, voted for Brexit. But the NFU, the actual, the leadership, the industry specialists were advocating to remain big time because they knew the impact. Liz Webster's one of those people. Go and follow her, and she is all over the economic impact of Brexit right now. So I would disagree. Post Brexit, the UK has still equaled or exceeded France and German growth. Then you've got, so watch out for correlation fallacies. So they have their own issues going on in France and Germany. So France has issues to do with welfare and budgets and reforms that Macron knows about, but he can't get through because the left wing won't let it happen, and the right wing wants to stymie them, and the centre right want it. So he's the centre right. Actually, you should agree with Macron, probably, Goose. You would be probably supportive of what he's trying to do, and he just can't get it through. They can't get it through because it keeps getting voted down, and they need to reform big time in France, like the pensions and the working age and all sorts. So France and Germany themselves have issues that long term. So the German have had long term stagnation and stuff that they're dealing with. So I don't think that's a fair comparison because there are too many variables at play. So we need to compare ourselves to ourselves, really, rather than to other nations. But anyway, that's my tuppence. I probably have to go now, but thank you to Goose. I really do like that. And the problem is, if you're pro EU, if you're anti EU, you will not want to lose the argument. No one wants to lose an argument and admit that actually something they wanted was a bad idea for one reason or another. I think it's complex. I think that, I don't want to get into the EU again, but I will do. I'll do a lot more, but just not now because I've got to go and speak to family. Anyway, take care, everybody. Thank you so much for all of your support. I really do appreciate it. I do. And I'm going to give a special round of applause for all of the people who have helped keep the lights on. And this is for Putin. In fact, again, we need more of that. More booing for Putin. Take care, everybody. Please, oh yeah, I keep forgetting to say this. Please hit the like. Please subscribe. If you haven't subscribed before, just think about my poor son, Oscar. Poor 15-year-old son who's not poor at all. He's bloody sits on his freaking PlayStation, or not anymore, his PC. Does too much gaming, probably because I'm on here too much. But he's desperate for a 100,000 plaque, and I'm just miles away from that. So if you haven't subscribed, please do. Just do it for Oscar. Or yeah, and the boos weren't vicious enough. I'll have to upload a new audio for that one, that's for sure. Don't forget to like the stream. Take care and speak to you soon.